he would turn up at this program and deliver on some of this information that
right.
he says he's got.
He could not appear today. And so really, we agree with Nelson Cuba, but for kind of different reasons. That the city is not really telling us the whole truth about the budget and the resources of the city, and that the overall direction of this city government is to fund this and that and the other thing, and to help out friends and sweethearts with contracts that are not bid out and so forth. Could be costing less if they were bid out, for example. And so we want them to stop that kind of spending, and maybe you could call it deception, you know, to squirrel away, to hide money from the public that is available for basic services. And may I say, you and I are of an age that we remember, you know, what importance the library had for you when you had nothing to do on a Saturday, or maybe you had a homework assignment to do at the last minute, where students always have. And but to cut the hours and then to change the character of the library services just doesn't seem right to me personally, because I grew up with a library that was fairly complete. You know, it was an important part of my life, I felt. But what about competitive bidding? We lost a chance to do something important in that area.
Well, obviously the Trail Ridge landfill contract, which, you know, we as an organization and several of us here, yeah, I guess you and I individually are on that lawsuit as well. In the case of Trail Ridge, the city of Jacksonville had an opportunity to at least explore more fully the option of bidding out the next 2 or 3 decades worth of garbage disposal out at Trail Ridge at the landfill. And rather than do that, the City Council earlier this spring chose to extend a already multi-decade contract into a contract that now is going on for approximately half a century. Hundreds of millions of dollars are involved, and as many people have stated, most of us included, if you're not going to bid out contracts that are worth hundreds of millions of dollars, why bother to bid out any of the contracts? Truth of the matter is, you look at something as simple as the batting cage that came up last summer when Richard Clark was proposing to do an emergency appropriation for a batting cage out in your neck of the woods, out at the beach. Right. It turned out that once they decided to take away the emergency and bid that out, they saved $8,000 on building the batting cage. Batting cage is a wonderful thing to have, but you know, if you've got $8,000 extra that you can apply to another batting cage or to some other facilities, or to mowing the grass on the athletic fields, for example, I mean, it just makes every aspect of a small budget extend that much further if you go ahead and use an appropriate procurement policy.
Right. And the idea of an emergency bill, this is key to the sweetheart nature of non-bid contracts. All of a sudden, we have this emergency where it has to be done right now. They take it off the agenda and put it right on the front burner. And they say, well, we have to spend this money now or we lose just a vital opportunity. And so, you know, from your own experience, anybody out there has handled any money at all, that this is liable to lead to waste and problems.
The real question is to gentlemen like Joe Andrews, who aspires to be on the City Council, right, as to how he would treat measures such as is that
emergency legislation. That is something I've noticed in the past, that there seems to be an awful lot of bills coming through council with emergencies or accelerated processing to them. Some of them are warranted, but I think such things as batting cages can't be emergencies in the real sense of emergency. I mean, obviously the provision was put in there for circumstances that warranted it. But on the notion of the batting cage, while that was money that was available to the councilman to do that, to me, spending on batting cages in a period of recession and tight budgets is a bit of an unnecessary expenditure. And the closer you look at the city budget, the more of those things you find. I was gratified to see Mr. Cuba's concern about spending, although his concern was rather specialized. And the reference to reserve funds, there are certain reserve funds within the city financing, but I'm not sure that all of them are some kind of skullduggery or inappropriate things. One of the big buzzwords in budgeting is pay-go, and that is you have to have money to pay for what you want to buy as you buy it. And in order to have that money available, sometimes you have to have a reserve fund where you accumulate the funds to do that. One problem with that is, though, that once politicians start to see a pool of money developing, it's very difficult for them not to want to spend it. Prime example is a few years ago when we had our city vehicle fleet. We had a pay-go system where we paid for vehicles as we bought them. But as the fund began to grow, people began to wonder, why do we have so many millions of dollars in this fund? Let's spend it, and we'll borrow money to pay for vehicles. That's the situation we're in now.
May I interject a point on the sort of related to the reserves? The city's financial situation actually is quite dire. The city's balance sheet is publicly available, and the numbers are roughly this. The city has about $4 billion in assets on its books, but most of those assets are things like roads and parks and things like that, nothing you can sell. The city's liabilities are approximately $5 billion, and that works out as follows: about $3.2 billion in debt to various debt holders, municipal bonds, other sorts of debt. And then on top of that, we have the $1.5 billion of official pension liability, and another $200 million or so due to something called actuarial smoothing, and then another $130 million or so due to the public employees' post-retirement health benefits. So add it all up, it's like about $5.2 billion debt, about $4 billion in assets. So it's any household with a situation like that, with say $50,000 in debt and $40,000 in assets, or $500,000 in debt and $400,000 in assets, is basically close to bankruptcy. So the city is in dire straits, if there is a small amount in reserves here and there, that's not necessarily so bad. What we have to do is start attacking the real problems, which are cutting back on these liabilities.
Very good.
Dave, may I jump in on that,
Sure.
too?
I jumped in on you. It's only fair.
I understand what Kurt is saying. If you look at a balance sheet, assets versus liability, and of course debt is a liability. But a balance sheet is a snapshot at a point in time. Debt is not, while it can be reflected at a point in time, it's also a time, long-term concept too. And to be a little bit more accurate, you need to look at the liability in terms of the current need to service that debt, as to whether or not the city is actually in bankruptcy. If you look at it only with the debt as a snapshot, then yes, it looks bad. Now, let me add that I am extremely concerned about the level of borrowing by this city. That is a topic that I want to look into and consult with some of the city financial people to get a better perspective on it.
what I